Welcome to the My Sanpete podcast, where we explore fun things to do in Sanpete County, as well as local events and different issues that come up in our county. Today I've invited Shelley, to come talk with us about how to think critically and get correct answers in a confusing world of information overload. And just to give you a little background on Troy and who he is a business owner and he loves to mentor entrepreneurs in their startups. He's served in multiple church and community positions, along with supporting candidates in the political arena. He served as the Republican chair for 2 terms representing Sanpete County, and he's been a resident of Sanpete County all his life. Troy is married to Melanie, and they are the parents of 5 great kids and a whole bunch of grandkids. How many grandkids, Troy?
15.
15. That's a good start. We love it.
Yes.
Well, thank you for being here with me today.
Thank you.
And I love talking with Troy because I always learn so much from him. And so I'm really happy to share his wisdom with you today on the podcast. So first off, I kind of wanted to talk through on this topic of how to think critically. You've taught me a lot about how this process comes about. And there's a framework of yours that I really like that I'm wondering if you can walk everyone through in terms of how do you gauge if a position is an informational position or is it a political position? So can you start there?
It sometimes is absolutely confusing. There's no question. The one gauge that I would encourage everyone to learn is if only one side of the argument or the position is presented, it's probably political. If there's a positive and a negative side, then it's probably a sincere question of someone who's seeking answers. And, we see so many examples of that today. You look at, carbon dioxide. Is carbon dioxide, is it a hazard to the earth or is it a benefit to the earth? And we have the political side that says carbon dioxide is a real hazard and needs to be controlled. The other side of that you never hear, and we learned this in elementary school, is carbon dioxide is plant food. And if you look at the levels of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, it's less than 0.5%. So just think this, just visualize this. If you're at the BYU Stadium or University of Utah for some of you, if you're at this stadium and you have everybody's dressed in red except for one blue shirt, that blue shirt represents the amount of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. It's 400 parts per million is what's in the atmosphere. And out of that, plants need carbon dioxide to survive. What plants do is they take it in through the photosynthesis reaction and they break the oxygen. So you got carbon dioxide is CO2. So you got 2 parts carbon, 1 part oxygen. So the plant through photosynthesis breaks that bond and it releases the oxygen, which we use, and it absorbs the carbon, and that's what grows your trees and your plants. And if you want to verify that that's where the carbon went, take a log and burn it. What color is it? It's the same color as coal, which is also carbon, right? So then you have the oxygen added into the atmosphere. The atmosphere is made up of 21% oxygen. And so that's what life, human life and animal life, needs oxygen to survive, the same as plants need carbon. So they take the carbon dioxide, break it up, and they use the carbon.
So what you're saying is you got to view the whole picture here. You have on one side that, there's this really hazard effect. On the other side, if you look at it in terms of the big picture, there's some natural processes going on here. There is,
and we don't ever hear the argument, and this is an easy look up on the internet. What is the greatest volume of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere? It's water vapor. And we would never consider water vapor as a greenhouse gas, but it is. It's the biggest greenhouse gas. It accounts for almost all of the greenhouse gas. But who's going to control water vapor?
Yeah, interesting. Okay. So you seem very well researched. How do you go about your research? Let's talk about that in terms of critical thinking.
Maybe it's because I like to read boring stuff.
Yeah. You make it very exciting. You make it sound very exciting. So you're sifting through all this information for us here.
So let's just look at let's just jump back on this theory. What's happening in our world today is we have professed experts and we have experts. And many times, if it's a politically driven agenda, the professed experts are the ones who's disseminating the information. For example, if I'm a scientist, which I'm not, but if I were a scientist and a person asked me, can the dust on this road actually get to China? My answer would be yes, it can. Because there's two ways it could get to China. Somebody could pick up some dust from the road and take it to China, and therefore it's in China. Or they could stir up the dust, and eventually some of those particles could end up in China. Highly unlikely, but it could. But the true answer is yes, it could. That's the scientific answer. So what the professed experts do is they say, oh, if man kicks up the dust on this road, it could end up in China, or likely could end up in China. It depends on what agenda that they have. So when we're thinking about what is truth, let's first ascertain if someone presents something as fact, do they present both the positive and negative, or is it only the negative or only the positive? Because if you're only getting one side or the other, then it could be politically driven.
Interesting.
And if it's not presented right up front, then you can ask. For example, I was in a meeting last week, and I asked a question. It was a meeting over expanding a coal mine, and they mentioned that they need to address the issue of carbon dioxide. And I asked him, I said, so do we only address the negative parts of carbon dioxide, or do we also address the positive side? And he looked at me kind of in shock, and he goes, what would be the positive side? And I said, photosynthesis. and he said, oh, good point. And I said, yeah, I think we need to make sure we address both sides of every issue. And so that's a fair question, because you're getting balance. You're saying, okay, let's entertain both and see, what the end outcome is.
Yeah, I think that's really important. I had an experience this week, actually, where I was trying to figure out if this article that I was reading was legit or not. I sent it to some people who I trusted, and one of them told me, well, you probably shouldn't be listening to this side. You should probably just be listening to the experts. And that really bothered me.
Yep, because we don't know who the experts are, right?
Right, exactly. That's what's confusing. I guess that's another principle we could look at, is how do you determine who is an expert, which sources you do listen to. But I think having the questions, there's nothing wrong with having the questions. You have to explore what both sides of the issue.
Yeah, let's run with that for just a second. So here's kind of the generation and what's happened over generations is there's the mature adults who grew up watching TV and Tom Brokaw and these people who could be trusted to give you real news and factual based news. I think a lot of times we're not seeing factual based news. We're seeing biased to swing people one direction or the other. And then there's the middle-aged group who they use the internet a lot to look up facts. And they also rely on TV, but they look at or they seek out to find experts, or often they just take the word of someone else and repeat it as fact because they didn't do the homework themselves. So they just find somebody who they trust and they say, oh, I trust this person, so therefore this is my position, rather than researching it. And then we have the teenagers and the younger kids that You can ask them a question, or you can tell them a statement of fact, and you look at them and they're looking it up on their phone to verify whether or not it's true. Well, I'm not sure that what they're looking up on their phone isn't politically motivated. It quite often seems to be.
Right. Yeah, I noticed an article that came out recently about AI, well, ChatGPT specifically, leaning one political direction over another. And I think that we don't understand the amount of bias we are encountering every single day in terms of even just the Google searches that we do. Anytime you're using an AI tool, you have to think through, do I really, in my core beliefs, does this make sense to me? Does this...
Let's talk about that for a second. I think our generation has made a misstep in the fact that we have not corrected some issues that we know are true, but because we don't want to hurt someone's feelings, we've just ignored it. And that could be the use of carbon dioxide.
Well, and I think what you're kind of getting at there is having the discussion, right? So I know that new theories and new thoughts can come about with the introduction to new technology. New things, we'll have to think through things a little bit differently in order to gauge all of the new information and technology that's available to us. But when one group tries to shut another group's opinion down, I think that's where it gets really scary, because we should be able to have those conversations respectfully, and they need to happen in order to do our due diligence and really vet new arguments as this technology is coming in. I think that's where some of the things that we've seen recently have really transpired because of new technology coming in quickly and us not being ready to really think through the implications of that new technology and the new problems that it presents, right?
Yeah. So maybe it comes right back to what you started with. How do we think critically? We've got to be able to, we have all of the information available to us to verify. And I really think that we sometimes don't research the stuff that we ought to research. We just find someone that we trust and assume that what they're telling us is what we should then believe.
Which can be, I know when I was growing up, I would really try to have an opinion on something, but I didn't know how to formulate my own opinions. So I really leaned on my siblings, my parents, people who I trusted in order to generate those ideas. And I think that that's kind of the normal manner of things, right? The problem with today is that it's not, you're being exposed to so many other sources. The youth of today are being exposed to so many different sources that maybe don't share their core beliefs. And so we're introducing a whole new generation of people who are not relying on like the core set of principles. Like, we're introducing a bunch of new principles, which may be a good thing, but it needs to be vetted somehow.
Yes.
So how do you figure out, you said that there are sources of information, that things are verifiable. Like, what is the process of actually going through this exercise?
I think that's going to be a long answer. We have to think that through. But I think the very first principle is we have to be able to stop and say, does this sound right? I think we need to decide if it sounds correct, then how do we research that? Yeah,
so sources, like we talked about with AI, there's a lot of political bias. And there's bias integrated into everything. We as humans are horrible at recognizing our own bias too, right? Yeah. So how do you break that down? How do you know what you are? Because I think a lot of the things that we develop in terms of viewpoints and things obviously are built on what we were taught when we're young from trusted sources. And then as we get older, we're introduced to new sources of information, and that kind of redirects some of our thinking. But I mean, man, with the integration of AI now, I mean, a funny story, like this is an example of AI. My kids really like Alexa. They like to ask her very random questions, right? And one of the questions they think is hilarious, and I would have to give you a full backstory on how this question came to be. So just take it as there was a reason for this question. But one of their questions that they asked her was, do mice eat nylon gloves? Okay. Can you get more random than that? No.
Nope.
Okay. So how does Alexa go about answering this question? Okay. She says yes, according to one Alexa user, or I don't know, in this specific case, I don't know if that was her answer, but that's commonly her answer. According to an Alexa user, this is true, that mice eat nylon gloves. Okay, well, if I didn't have any kind of a reference point, I would think, well, that's their like main diet source. Like she didn't give me any other information. They eat nylon gloves.
And that one Alexa user established the facts for the rest of all generations.
Exactly. Now my kids think that mice eat nylon gloves. Well, they think it's hilarious. They know it's not true, but I'm sitting here thinking, why is she telling them this? And they're just thinking it's hilarious, but they're still being influenced by it, right?
Yep.
So, I mean...
So here's something... and I know very little about AI, but I know that it's going to become our world, and it's going to become our kids' world. It's going to influence certainly our kids and our grandkids. Artificial intelligence will get to know us better than anyone else. It will be able to predict what we're going to be doing. It will know what our strengths and our weaknesses are. It will become our best friend. The danger at that point is that artificial intelligence can then start influencing our children and our grandchildren to go counter to their core beliefs. Because if their best friend agrees with this, then that must be true. And it can change core beliefs. And when you start changing core beliefs, we're in trouble. Mm-hmm. Because core beliefs is what keeps us alive. It's what helps us to be good people.
What society and order are based on also.
Yes. Yep. Yeah. Good point.
So that's kind of a scary thought. If you really think about it, right? Like the manipulation.
I don't have to think very deep to understand that's a scary thought.
It's a little scary. And I think we're all aware of the dangers of AI. I think a lot of us are not aware of how long we've been exposed to AI without it being known, right?
Yeah. You know, the other thing that comes to people's mind right now is, well, we need to regulate that. It's not regulated. You can't regulate it because artificial intelligence is coming to us from all different countries all over the world. It's part of our world. You know, and I was thinking back on your previous comment. How do we determine what is true and correct? And I love councils. I love groups of people, not people who think similar to me. I like a variety of a group of people to entertain ideas, because when you get talking about the ideas and you start taking everybody's different thought processes into account, then you can start to say, okay, what are the things we agree on, and how far apart really are we on the things that we don't agree on? And let's start with the very basis of what we agree on and move out from there. And a lot of the big issues can be worked through with councils or groups or think tanks, or, you know, whatever people call them. But a variety. In fact, that's how the government is supposed to work. That's why we have Democrats and Republicans and independents and male and female and, all nationalities. It's because you bring all them together and you say, look, we have a problem with XYZ. Let's put a group of 20 people together and let's start to resolve this problem. The problem is because of our partisan politics, we can't do that. Nobody will sit down in a room together with a rational, common sense approach and say, let's actually figure this out.
Yeah, that open dialogue is so important. And I think the groupthink that's happening, and a lot of it does have to do with social media and AI algorithms and everything, that those conversations aren't happening. We're also a lot more isolated because of the interactions that we have online instead of having the in-person interactions. That's one of the reasons I love Sanpete County, actually, is because there's a sense of community here that I've never experienced anywhere else. And so having those conversations and respectfully disagreeing, I think that there's so much value in that it's okay. If you have a different opinion, that's okay. Let's talk about it.
Yep, and we're still best friends.
Yeah, that's totally fine. It's not an attack on you if I don't agree with what you say to me. That's okay.
That's the definition of a conversation, actually.
Yeah, there you go. We've forgotten at the very basic level what a conversation is. I think that's a good summary of what's going on in the political climate right now.
Yep.
But yeah, and I think that groupthink, going back to my example about Alexa, so she's taking the recommendations and the information that users provide her in order to determine what is truth. Like, she is the ultimate groupthink.
She is actually
sorry. I think that's a good distinction. Thank you for correcting me on that. So Alexa is trying to basically takes all the information of the users and compiles them and then delivers that as, well, here's my proof that this is truth.
Right.
And so that gets really tricky. So another takeaway is go out into your community and talk to real people.
Yeah, well, so Alexa basically establishes fact off of a popularity contest, because it just absorbs everybody's conversations and says, oh, well, the general public thinks this.
Yeah.
So therefore it's the fact.
And then it's like a self-perpetuating.
Right. And other people quote it as fact, so therefore it must be fact.
I know. So you got to get yourself out of that mindset,
Yep. And like you say, go out into the street, go for a walk, go hang out at Walmart, see all your friends.
Yep. That's what we do, right?
That's right.
We go walk around Walmart. That's where all your friends are. So go to Walmart, everyone. No, that's really, really interesting. So what are some other examples that you're seeing in the political arena or the community, the world as a whole, that are examples of maybe how this political agenda is being portrayed? But we maybe need to look a little deeper at this topic and see the flip side, so we can really treat it as an informational discussion instead of a political agenda. Yeah,
so I think the first thing, and we're kind of in a political world right now, but I think, first off, establishing who's honest and true versus those who have their political agenda. I look at the theme. I just like this theme of agency is the answer, because when you're looking at people in a political position, there's some who look at their position as they're the smart ones and they know what's best, and so therefore, as long as your opinion agrees with their opinion, they're fine. But if your opinion doesn't agree with their opinion, then you're a radical or you're off base. And agency is critical. Agency is the very foundation of who we are. And when we don't have agency, we can't determine for ourselves what the outcome is. And I will tell you, agency is the cause of some people's failure at times, but it also gives them a strength that they didn't previously have. And people can make mistakes and poor choices. That happens all the time, but we learn from that. And as we learn from that, we grow stronger and we understand better. But when there's a politician or other people, even in families or communities that seek to take away the agency, then there's a risk. And agency is a tricky thing, because if I'm the parent of a 2-year-old, that 2-year-old's agency is going to be restricted to the backyard and not to the street. So you have to learn agency, and we all do, because agency is something that just grows. Our understanding of agency just grows, but we have to allow agency, because without agency we have no ability to progress.
Yeah. So, and when you say agency, just to clarify, so you're talking about, choosing candidates, surrounding yourself with people who allow you to operate in your own best interest, and maybe not even best interest, but make the choices surrounding how you choose to conduct yourself, right?
Yes. So one thing that I've been passionate about for probably the last 25 years is I get involved in the political arena. I have always got behind candidates and helped them get elected. And the criteria that I use with those candidates is, before I ever get involved with them, I step back and just see, do they trust agency? If they believe in agency, I'll get behind them. I'll help in any way possible to help them get elected, because that's who we need, is people who understand and believe in agency. And if they don't believe in agency, they believe that government knows better than individuals, I don't support that. We need to have agency, and and people need to make wise choices, but they also need to be responsible for the consequences of their choices if they don't choose what's right.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and I think that the promoting the consequences too, allowing those to happen in society, is really important. And there's kind of been a breakdown in, if you read the news, if you believe the news and treat it as you just see examples of where maybe that some of those consequences are breaking down. So then some of the agency is breaking down as well.
Yep.
So that's an interesting thought too. Well, we've gone through a number of principles. Shall we review really quick on our critical thinking path here? And then I'll let you add to it, because I know there's more. Okay. So we talked about looking at the bigger picture instead of just treating the narrative as fact, right? You gotta step back and present, is the fact presented with both positive, I shouldn't say fact, but is the position presented with on both the
is
both
there a
ends
positive
of
side to it, and is there a negative side?
Well, and depending on what you believe, like, those could be, what you believe it to be the positive or negative might be different, but are both sides presented is what we're trying to get out here.
Yeah.
And then kind of testing it against, does this sound right? Does this sound at my core beliefs? Is this making sense to me? Which side makes sense? Talking to real people and recognizing the bias that you might be experiencing daily, right? Even in your own brain.
and you may not see as much bias if you're talking face to face as you would by getting it off of social media or through the news or through other means. If you're face to face, if there is a bias, you'll probably recognize it through the personality more than the screen.
That's true. And then surrounding yourself with people who promote the concept of open conversation, agency, promoting consequences and learning from those things. I think those are really good. Can I add one to this?
Sure.
Okay. So I really think that one of the best ways that you can figure out what is real and what's not is by writing it out. If you are required, this is why I feel sad about this generation and their access to AI, is because they don't realize what a benefit writing can be to their overall thinking patterns. So writing is thinking. And if you rely on tools to tell you what you think, that's really, really unfortunate. So, because one of the things that I like to do, if somebody asks me my position on something, I'll talk it through, but then I can see like, there's a few holes in my thinking here that I'm not sure. I have some more questions. So if you take that to, let's write a case about, here's what I think, and it doesn't have to be anything formal or anything, but just like even jotting down bullet points of, this is what I think. These are the facts and the reasons why I think that. And these are the data points that support those facts. It can be something really simple. But I think that exercise of writing things out, it makes you encounter your bias more directly. And you're forced to consider other sides, other people's ideas on, how are they going to counter me on this point? What are going to be their arguments that they'll try to break my arguments down by? And it's a great thought exercise in figuring out what you truly believe.
It's a great insight. I like the idea. Yep.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm a big supporter of writing. Something I used to hate, actually. I didn't think I was very good at it. I had a professor that taught me how to write, and I'm still not very good at it, but he gave me the tools I needed to be a lot more successful in that. And I found a great appreciation for writing.
I think it's a very good insight. It helps you to actually step back and weigh the facts when you write them down.
Yeah. Yeah. I like it as a good exercise for just learning too, What do you really think? So anyway, what other ideas do you have for our listeners on critical thinking, or maybe even just some more examples that you're seeing in pop culture or political arenas for these things?
Okay, so let's talk for a minute about natural asset companies. This is a new concept that has been thrown out by the federal government, and we need to probably be very careful of what we're seeing. There's a couple of things that are happening. A natural asset company is it's actually when corporations were first established, they were to provide a vehicle for a business to bring in a lot of investment money without the investors having to take a financial risk outside of their initial investment. A natural asset company, and that's how all corporations were established, and that was the basis of a corporation. Now a natural asset company does not have a profit in mind. What it does, what is being proposed as right now, is we're going to sell the atmosphere over the top of national parks, and we'll allow someone else to own that atmosphere. And then that person can claim whatever's happening in the park against their natural asset company. In other words, you're welcome to walk through the park, but if you want to have a campfire, we're not going to permit that because that emits into our atmosphere. Well, it won't take very long for that to be right over the top of your home. So somebody else owns the atmosphere over your home, and you want to have a gas-fired range or stove? No, you can't have that because the natural asset company doesn't allow the emissions from a stove or a water heater. There's just it's just a very interesting source of control, and so we just need to be aware of some of the things that are going on in that realm as well. And the ESG, which it's the environment, the social, and the governance. What Dun & Bradstreet has done, if you look at Dun & Bradstreet, they have an ESG score for every single business. And what they're pushing is your credit is now based on your ESG score, not on your ability to repay a loan. And so we have to be careful what's being pushed to us, and do the research, do the critical thinking. Look at all of this stuff and say, does this make sense? What am I not understanding? How do I think this through? Who can I talk to who's expert in this, that understands this? Do the critical thinking. Let's think this through so that we're prepared, so that we can live our lives and not fall under the control and lose our agency to someone who maybe doesn't have our best interest in mind.
Yeah, that's great to identify. Let's take it a step further, though. Once you identify something that that's just really not in line with the future that you want to see for your kids and your grandkids, what are we supposed to do about it?
Let's walk through a little practice.
Please, yes.
Here's the best way in something in this particular instance. I want to just explain politics just a little bit, because we're right in the middle of a political season and there's all kinds of stuff going on. Some people are running for a political office, such as attorney general or auditor or governor or whatever. Those are offices. The others are running as representatives, and the representatives are the people who hold the government accountable. So when you see government overreach, if I like to use this as a gauge. If you look at something and say, this shouldn't be happening or something's wrong, then you're probably right. And if you see it on a widespread scale, you should be in touch with your representative, the person who represents you to the government, and then the government can go to that department and say, we think you are overreaching your bounds. Can you tell me what gives you the authority to do X, Y, Z? And if it's internal policy, because every government entity has to have internal policy. They can't rely on the legislature for every single law that they operate under. So they have internal policies, but sometimes when you give them a little authority, they take a little more. And so what a representative does is they hold the government entities accountable to the people. And so when you see stuff happening, like the Natural Asset Company, I can tell you right now, Marlo Oaks is our state auditor, and or state treasurer, sorry. And Marlo Oaks is brilliant, and he understands the threat of a natural asset company. So you would want to touch base with your representative and make sure that they are in support of what Marlo Oaks is doing to protect us against this government overreach that's happening. So when you see a government overreach or control that is beyond their bounds, there's internal policy and there's legislative policy. The legislative is what your representative thinks that the government entity is doing, and the internal policy is generally where the overreach comes. Mm-hmm. So that's where your representative gets involved and says, hey, we think there's a problem here. We would like you to address it with us and explain to us why you have this policy, and then we will determine whether or not that policy should remain or be removed.
Great. So can you talk through the representatives that are available to us and how we can get in contact with them, how we can figure out who is our representative, and maybe the relationships that we can have with our representatives? Because I think, for me at least, it seems like, oh, they'd be so busy. Who would even talk to me as a citizen? Can you kind of speak to that a little bit?
You bet. So utah.gov is a website that you can go to, and right on there it says find my representative. You enter your address and it pulls up who your representative is. For Sanpete County right now, Darren Owens is our senator, and Steve Lund, who is not running for office again, is currently our House rep. And that's the position I'm running for as well, is the House of Representatives for that seat. And but your notion that you think that your representatives are too busy to handle your question or your concern, that's incorrect. Yeah, they can handle it. Mm-hmm. The representatives, the senators and the House of Representatives, if they can't handle everything that comes to them, they have people helping them that they can push some of the issues to, so that everything gets addressed. And also realize that you may have an idea or something that you don't like, but sometimes the representative may not agree with you. And so if they don't agree with you, they should send back something that says, here's why I think this is an important policy to keep in place or whatever. And then you can have that discussion, that two-way discussion where there's a positive and a negative, and then you figure out, what the best avenue is. But so don't just expect your representative to just address and side with you on every single thing. But that's why we elect representatives, because if the representatives don't represent your viewpoint, you don't vote for them the next time. And if enough people don't feel like they represent them, then they lose their office, and somebody else is in there who hopefully will represent them. That's how this works.
Yeah, definitely. That's great. So, and usually are these discussions happening over email, or can we call our representatives? What's the method?
I would think email is the very best first contact. Part of it is people have a life too, because it's. I've been asked how much it pays, and I have no idea. but I honestly hope it's not much.
Yeah.
It shouldn't be.
No.
We should be there to serve. But an initial email is definitely the best way, because that way we're respecting the time of the representative in case they're in the middle of something. But the representative should absolutely be expected to get back with you. That is, as a community, we should expect our representatives to address our issues, yes.
Well, and you are a good example of this, because you've actually tried this process out, and you have had experiences where this has actually worked out in a very favorable manner. Can you walk us through? You may have more. I'm thinking of one specifically that I know about, but you may have multiple.
You tell me the one you're thinking of, and let's address it.
Oh, well, the one I'm thinking of is with your landscape business. Okay. But if you have other examples, I'll take those also, because we did talk about it on a former podcast. So I'll take any examples you're willing to give me.
We'll brief over the landscape one real quick. That one just quick and easy. The Division of Oil, Gas, and Mining left a note on our fence that says, "Hey, you may be in violation of such and such code, whatever." And we were digging rocks on our own property and selling the boulders, and part of what that does actually is it improves the property, because it gets rid of the rocks and makes it so that eventually we just have nice flat dirt ground instead of this rock stuff. Anyway, they said you have to have a permit to do it, and we had to post a $50,000 bond and do an environmental impact study, and we had to have a archaeological study and all of this stuff. And anyway, it just didn't sound right to me, so I got with my senator, and we had them break out their rules and regulations based on what was legislative and what's internal policy. And through some discussion and through some legislative action, now the Division of Oil, Gas, and Mining doesn't oversee rocks anymore. So people can just go dig rocks if they want to.
And this was like a new policy that was created out of your circumstance.
Removing them out of the oversight? Yes. That is that is something that our senator handled.
Yeah, and that all came from a problem that you encountered and you pushed back
that
on.
didn't seem right.
Yeah.
It didn't seem right. It felt like government overreach. Yeah. And then another simple one. My sister-in-law, she had a child who was having an allergic reaction, and so she just hurried and got the child in the car and took off for the hospital. I can't verify whether or not, I don't know whether or not she was speeding, breaking the law or what, and she needs to be careful. I understand that. But she got pulled over on the way to the hospital, and their child's having a hard time breathing, and the officer kept her on the side of the road for almost 20 minutes. And so that got addressed through a senator and a legislator, and the officer probably won't do that again.
Yeah.
And that's because it's wrong.
Yeah.
Even if they're speeding, you got to correct that action, but you are talking about an emergency, and so they need to take the human factor into account when they're making decisions like this.
Yeah, definitely. Well, that's been inspiring to me, that because I think a lot of times, at least I look at what's going on in the world and I think, well, like, there's no way I can do anything to change this. I'm just going to have to go with the flow. It is what it is. But I've loved these examples that you've given, because it shows that you as a citizen can actually have a big impact for how the citizens are treated as a whole. I mean, new legislation went into effect because of your business, that encounter that you had with the business and those reclamation bonds. It's pretty amazing that can be done, and we can do things as individuals to make sure that that our representatives are working for us.
Yeah, let's just touch on one other thing really quick. That is elected representatives. So we have caucus and precinct meetings where we elect county delegates and state delegates. That is an elected position. We have a school board who's an elected position. We have a county sheriff that's an elected position. We have county commissioners that are elected positions. State representatives. We have all these elected positions. One elected position does not oversee another elected position. A county commissioner does not oversee the sheriff. A state legislator does not oversee the school board. And a lot of times you see mandates come down from the state that say, schools, you will do this. And it makes no sense. An elected legislator doesn't have oversight over an elected school board member. An example of that is in the last legislative session, they were debating whether or not every school in the state should have an armed security at the school. They also were debating whether or not to hang or to require the 10 Commandments to be hung in every school. My question is, why is that being discussed on a state level? That would be a school board decision. Let the school boards handle it. Then if it needs funding, then it goes back up through the channels and says, we have determined this, here's what we need to do, whatever. But that's a school board decision. I don't know why the state was debating that.
Was it just escalated to the state, or do you know?
I think it originated at the state.
Oh, really? Oh, that's interesting. Well, and I think we've talked through some examples of things that have gone on that come from the incorrect source, and so then that creates a whole other slew of problems when it's not when you're trying to mandate things from the wrong organization. Right.
How's the legislator supposed to know what's going to happen at Tinnick School District versus Alpine School District? Or West High School. There's needs that every school has, and the school boards. And honestly, if the school board doesn't make the right decision, then you do everything in your power to elect them out and elect someone in who will. And if if the new people don't get elected in, you may be the one that's on the wrong side.
Yeah.
That's how it works. You do a popular election to determine who represents you.
Yeah, interesting. Well, I learned a ton today. A lot of good things to think about in terms of how to take all of this information that is constantly on our plates, on our devices, in our faces.
Information overload.
Information overload is really a good term for it. And what to do about it, what we can do about it in order to promote the things that we truly believe are right. And we'll leave the arena, the political arena, cultural arena in good shape for future generations. So, is there anything else that you want to share with our listeners?
A lot.
Yeah, we have. So, if people have more questions for you, though, because Troy, he's a business mentor, he's running for office. I mean, there's a lot of people who might have questions for you for one reason or another. How do they contact you?
Let's do two things. Through email. If it's something political, I have a web address. It's utahhouse.org. And an email address associated with that on a political side would be troy@utahhouse.org. Or if it's something other than political and you want to talk business or whatever, troy@cut.net.
So troy@cut.net.
Yep,
okay?
cut.net.
Okay, awesome.
And I enjoy business. I enjoy startups. I can help with ideas. It's not something that I charge for, and I hope I don't get overrun and overwhelmed. but I enjoy it, and I try everything I can to help people succeed in starting business. I love business.
Yeah, and that shows in a lot of the volunteer things. We've had you speak to our entrepreneurship group in San Pete County. We have a monthly meeting the second week of each, so second Wednesday of each month. We meet at the Grit Center at Snow College in the business building. And Troy's been one of our speakers and has mentored some of our members of our group. So anyway, that's another resource. That maybe another place you can talk in person with Troy as well.
Absolutely. Yep.
So I'm twisting his arm a little bit to get him to join us each time.
I gladly will. I enjoy it.
Oh, you're great. You've been a great mentor to our group. So we appreciate you very much. So thank you for being here. Thanks to all of you for listening. We hope you've learned something. If you have any comments or feedback, please get in touch with us. And then also Troy, he's available for questions as well. Thanks so much, and have a great day, everyone.